Hello, everyone, and inside today's Locked On Canadiens, a top 5 draft pick is in the Canadiens' future.
You are Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1018 of Locked On Canadiens. We are your daily Montreal Canadiens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every single day of the week. And today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Just download the Sleeper app, use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get $100 match on your first deposit. Some terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. I am one of your hosts. I am Scott Matla, of course, and I'm joined, as always, by the active stick, Laura Saba. And Laura, it was a tank-heavy week for the Montreal Canadiens with another loss on Saturday, and yet I don't see as much doom and gloom from this fan base as usual, which I have to say is a nice change of pace from around the usual losing in so far.
I think so. I think part of it is that they are getting closer and closer to a higher draft pick. But I also find that lately the losses haven't been as hopeless as they have been in the past, in that you're seeing a lot of positive signs at the 5-on-5 level. And even though there's obviously so far for this team to go in order to progress, there's still so many steps in their build. I feel like personally, the fact that they're playing in a way that gives us something to cheer for or some sort of hope is it's why people aren't upset. Like, because you are getting closer to that draft pick, but you're also not doing it in such a way that the games are just abject disasters.
And I'm looking at the natural stat trick. For those who didn't get to watch the game on Saturday, the Habs lost 4-3 to the New Jersey Devils. In the game, they were leading, lost it, and then gave up, I believe, 3 unanswered goals. If I'm looking at here, Habs scored, Devils scored, Habs scored, Devils scored, Devils scored. So, yeah, 3 unanswered goals until they added a late one from Nick Suzuki to keep it close. I'm looking at all the numbers again. Won the expected goals battle, more high danger chances, more scoring chances at 5-on-5, more shots for 5-on-5. A pretty even split, in shot attempts and everything. But at the same time, for the Habs, that's great. You're keeping pace with the team that is supposed to be one of the best in the Eastern, supposed to be, is the key word here. The Devils were abysmal in this game. And I know a lot of them are saying, oh, it's Lindy Ruff. Lindy Ruff's a bad coach. Your team should not be going 50-50 with the Montreal Canadiens, who have one line, their likely third option goaltender, and a thrown together kind of defensive core that is Mike Matheson and friends. Again, if you're going to lose with a positive impact, I guess, in this one. And I'm just kind of taking a look at all the things that were on the fancy stats and everything that back there. Cole Caulfield and Juraj Slafkovsky played well at 5-on-5. Nick Suzuki obviously did. Suzuki got a pair of goals in this game, which is outstanding. If you're gonna lose, at least lose with some shine on it. We talked about how the Sabres game where it was like, well, they got goalied, whatever. Then the Penguins game where they played well, probably deserved a better fate, didn't really get much outside of a Matheson goal. I'm fine. I will be happy if they lose competitive games like this. This was probably exactly the kind of thing that they needed in this to see. The top line was phenomenal because I was watching this game as I was watching the Rocket game on Saturday, and more on the Rocket later on in this episode. But I got to say the Habs looked like the much better team than the Devils, and the Devils are the team that are supposed to be competing for a playoff spot at this point. I don't even think they are in one currently. Let's take a look here. They are 5 points behind Tampa Bay for the second wild card spot. So
we hate to see it.
Yeah, it's terrible. How awful. Meanwhile, the Penguins are 9 points out and I have a positive goal differential, and I will never understand that. I will not try to understand that. It is very funny to me, but the Devils have been really mediocre and their goaltending's bad still, which is a penance for having the most overrated goalie of all time in their lineup. But what did you see on Saturday? We know Nick Suzuki was good, but I watched this game and I went, it felt like the Habs were the far more dangerous team. And I don't know if that's just cognitive bias or not playing into this.
Or it could be Habs fan bias too, because I saw it as well. I felt that they seem to be making smarter decisions on the ice than we've seen in recent months. And I can say that, like, honestly, it's been like maybe 7, 8 games that it feels like they've been doing so, right? And you can kind of take out the Ducks. That's kind of an anomaly because like it was just they were super dominant for that one. But for these other games against so-called mediocre or better teams, like equally mediocre or better teams, I felt that there was more strategy, but the players were also executing better. So I feel like partly it's like Martin St. Louis as well, or his assistant coaches have kind of taken steps forward in terms of combating the opposing team's adjustments, right? Like generally we would see the Habs would come out with an okay to good first period, and then one thing would happen, the opponents would make adjustments, one thing would happen, and then everything would just unravel, right? So you're not seeing that unraveling. They're playing a tighter, more cohesive game. Like you said, they are the ones with the higher danger chances or the more frequent chances as well, in against teams where you think like, okay, this is how they should be playing. Like you watch that and you're like, they're not that terrible. They're a bad team, right? But they're not a hopeless team. Like there's elements to this team that should be able to execute. So that's what I've been seeing in the last, I want to say 7 or 8 games to be conservative. I don't want to go much further than that. But it felt like they were less hopeless. And it sounds awful to say, like, that's not something that we should be praising or celebrating right now. But we want to see less awful, but we also want to see a high draft pick. So you're kind of torn. But it does feel like people are more positive about this team in the last like 2.5 weeks.
And I'm looking at Tankathon, the draft lottery simulator and everything. The Canadiens are sitting in the sixth pick right now in this draft. Arizona is 2 points behind them or ahead of them, I guess, with 2 games in hand. Ottawa has finally passed the Montreal Canadiens with 3 games in hand. The Habs are going to potentially slide. They play the Coyotes on Tuesday night. And to be quite honest, after the whole Logan Cooley draft tweet, I want them to blow Arizona out of the building and into Quebec City or Houston or Atlanta or anywhere else. And then after that, go back to losing. The Habs have lost 5 straight, their worst streak of the season, 2-7-1 in their last 10 games. Not a bad spot to be. And if you're wondering who the Tankathon mock draft has the Montreal Canadiens picking right now at 6th overall, Caden Lindstrom of the Medicine Hat Tigers, who is currently kind of like my potential draft crush for this spot here. If he is available, I don't think he will be because I don't think people, in spite of Ivan Demidov being incredible, will pick him, which is dumb and stupid and a terrible mistake. And then the Jets pick is currently sitting at 29th in the draft order there. So that has them taking Henry Muse, a defenseman from Ottawa. The point being with this is that the Habs' upcoming schedule is they have Arizona on Tuesday, which is a 4-point tank game. The Panthers on Thursday, and they've never played well against the Panthers recently. And then the Lightning on Saturday. They don't play well when they go to Florida, usually. The Panthers may be without Matthew Tkachuk. The Lightning are having a very weirdly mediocre season, but they're still the Lightning. Then it's the Preds, Hurricanes, and then we welcome Toronto back the day after the trade deadline. They are thankfully not playing on the trade deadline this year, which is nice. All signs right now point to the Habs likely picking in the top 5 again. It's not as bad as last year because the injuries are worse because there's no Kirby Dach this year. But I am a little bit more hopeful going into this draft lottery than I was last year. Last year felt very like nothing is going right. Slavkovsky is hurt. Jack Eye is hurt. Kirby Dach is out, which sucks, but there's still enough other young players that are playing well, Joshua Waugh included in there, that there's still worthwhile games to play here. So we will have your game preview for Arizona tomorrow in tomorrow's episode with some other things coming up. Laura, do you have any parting thoughts before we move on to the rest of this episode?
The Devils are cheeks, as you would say.
Yeah, I can't say what I actually think about them without getting a strict talking to or passive aggressively made fun of on Twitter. So we will move on from that. The Devils were not good. I'm going to laugh when they miss the playoffs and keep Lindy Ruff anyways. That's funny to me specifically. Coming up, we have a shorter 3 up and 3 down for Monday. And then we have some listener Habs Mount Rushmores that we want to get to in our final segment. And that's all coming up next. But first, our newest sponsor is the fine folks at Camino Consulting. You've heard of our online families and couples courses, and take advantage of the Locked On 25% discount running to the end of the month. But what about live seminars? In both sport and business, the challenge in differentiating candidates and recruits is an endless battle. Everyone can demonstrate their measurables and qualifications, but we all know that it's the intangibles that matter when those things are most similar. Contact Camino Consulting for their team and management seminars to get a peek behind the curtain and watch your next recruiting class or hiring group become one of the most effective you've ever seen, both because you identified the right candidates and because you've learned how to communicate and motivate them in accord with their own preferences. But you aren't in business management or working with a team? They pay for referrals as well. Make some money making your workplace and favorite teams better. Every group works together at the end of the year or better than week one. So contact Camino Consulting at caminoconsulting.ca and get on the fast track to understanding. We are back here at Locked On Canadiens. And normally on Monday, we do 3 up and 3 down. We have a full segment of everyone falling down the list, and we have a segment of everyone rising up the list. We had some listener stuff we wanted to get back to, the Mount Rushmore stuff that was important. And there wasn't a lot outside the NHL that was worth praising in this week. So we are kind of combining everything down into one easy to digest middle segment here. And the first down for the week is, and I feel bad, it almost feels like I'm bullying this guy, but Laura, what do you even do with Josh Anderson at this point? Honestly, what do you even do now?
Teach him a new skill or a new business.
Well, could his business be like hitting the net since we're paying him $5.5 million a season? Like even Brendan Gallagher scored against the Devils, which also very funny if you're giving up goals to Brendan Gallagher in 2024. But I look at some of the plays. Josh Anderson has been sent in alone, fires it over the net. He gets a perfect 2-on-1 pass at the back post. Goalie doesn't have a prayer, sails it over the net. I've seen like the yips and I've seen people struggle. I watched the Scott Gomez year without a goal team, for God's sakes. And like, this is approaching that level that I feel bad. And also that you're not doing anything else well enough for me to be like, yeah, it's fine. Just keep him. You're not. He's not playing well enough for me to be like, hell yeah. Can't wait for the next Josh Anderson shift out there. And that if Kent gets offered any package at all, just take it at this point. I almost feel like I'm bullying the guy, but I can't watch it anymore. It is abysmal to watch. Just chances hit his stick and die. It used to be when he came in with speed on a pass, you're like, oh, he's going to ring one off the post. He's going to beat the goalie fat. And this year it is just every time Josh Anderson touches the puck, I assume it is going anywhere but the back of the net at this point.
And that's the thing, like it does feel like bullying at this point, but it's also like it's not gratuitous. It's every single time something goes wrong or he can't put something together, right? It's not like we're sitting here looking for reasons to criticize Josh Anderson. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We're always looking for reasons to say something positive for him to have something to build on. And that's the thing, like even Martin St. Louis is being very, very delicate with him. Like it's not like it's really not a bullying situation. It's just that he can't seem to get it together. And I feel so bad because like I know it's not his desire to play this way. I think it's just his ability is playing this way.
And that's the thing is it's like he's still got talent. We've seen him do things. It's just the one thing that he was brought into to score goals with speed, he'd come in off the rush, and as he's bolting in, he just uncorks the wrist shot. That confidence isn't there. He is cutting to his backhand. He's trying to cut inside. It's like, you are not a Ferrari, Josh. You are a Toyota Land Cruiser with a souped up engine in that. Go run things over and do things with power. You are the Jeremy Clarkson of this line. You are not made to be finesse or the bright spot. You are made to just hit the power button on everything. Back to basics on that. To round out the downs here, because this was a crucial weekend for the Laval Rocket. They beat one of the top teams in the AHL on Wednesday in a shootout. Played not great, but enough to get the win in that game. They won in a shootout against Hershey. That set up a huge weekend with the Toronto Marlies on Friday and Saturday. They got Sean Farrell back from injury. They got Jan Mishak back on Saturday. And Brandon Gignac cleared waivers. That's a pretty big reinforcement for this team. Still lacking on defense. Dobish started on Friday. Keskisuo started on Saturday. It was bad, to be very, very honest with you. The Rocket on Friday had 9 power plays and scored on 1 of them. Toronto had 5 power plays and scored on 3 of them. As you can tell, the Laval Rocket did not win that game. And then on Saturday, the Rocket didn't show up. Kazimir Keskisuo didn't even play the entire game. Jakub Dobish came in. The Rocket had nothing on Saturday. And I've seen them be really bad this year, and I mean terrible this year. This is the first time since like the first month or so of the season where I went, this is a team that doesn't look put together. Passes are not going anywhere. Offensive zone time is wasted. Power plays are wasted. The defensive structure is not good. Too many, brain shut off moments, and guys that they are counting on to step up in these spots are not doing so. Since Logan Mailloux has lost Arbor Jackeye as his partner, there's been flashes of good, but a lot of flashes of the work in progress that is still there. Trying to do too much instead of, just making the simple play, getting caught out of position, a little bit longer shifts. And this applies to the entire defensive core. And they were a point out of a playoff spot going into this series with the Marlies. And if I'm looking at the standings now, they are now 5 points out of a playoff spot. The Amerks are ahead of them with 1 game in hand. They have 56 points. The Marlies have 56 points with 2 games in hand. The Senators are tied in games played with the Rocket. They have 57 points. Basically, the Rocket might have shot themselves in the foot a little bit here. This was their best shot, I think, at getting into a playoff spot or confirming it a little bit. And I'm looking at their upcoming schedule. Bridgeport on Wednesday, Hartford, Springfield. That's 3 out of conference games. And then it's Syracuse, Cleveland, Bridgeport, Toronto, Belleville, Toronto, Utica, Belleville, Syracuse, Springfield, Cleveland, Belleville. They are basically playing all North Division opponents for the rest of the year. They basically have to be flawless at this point, which is probably not. I realize that I'm talking a lot in this because the Rocket are my baby. Laura, did you have an interjection or anything in there as well?
Not about the Rocket. And also I'll be talking a lot in our next segment, so it's okay.
So we do want to end on a good note. The biggest thing is Nick Suzuki is incredible. We talked about it in the first segment. The top line of Slavkovsky, Caulfield, and Suzuki was everywhere in the Devils game. On the power play at 5-on-5, when they got the puck in the offensive zone, it felt like that first line was on a power play. Even if Slavkovsky wasn't on the score sheet, you're seeing all the good habits still paying off in his mind there. I love seeing the development that has come from that. And I think that is, even with all the losses and the frustration that's sure to come, if the top line continues to play like that, hell yeah. That's all. That makes me happy. It's like we said, top line points, Habs lose. Got no complaints on that.
The thing I think about Nick Suzuki that's key is that he's continuing to build on what he's already good at, right? Like he still hasn't entirely reached his peak, which a lot of people thought he already had. Like this is as good as he's going to get. But he keeps applying new things that he learned to his game. He keeps changing the way he plays in accordance to what he learns about his own ability. Like he seems to be quite self-aware in that regard, and he puts in the work, right? Like he's a little nerd, and we love that about him because he cares. Like he really, truly does look at what's going to make his game better in the smaller, finer ways. Like I'm pretty sure he's fully aware what he brings to the table right now, but any tools that he can have at his disposal to increase his abilities or to enhance them or augment them. And that's the thing. Like I'm about to make a comparison, but it's about the attitude and not the talent. So nobody come at me for this, but Sidney Crosby is the type of player to look at data and to look at game tape and videotape and all of that, and then pick little things in his game that he can constantly be improving. And that's the kind of attitude that Nick Suzuki has. So, no, I'm not saying he's as talented as Sidney Crosby. But what I am saying is that work ethic and that approach and that like nerdery is there. And that to me is what I appreciate the most about Nick Suzuki.
He is the straw that stirs the drink, the spoon that stirs the pot, whatever you want to call it. Uh, and he's just so efficient at that. He's trending for a new career high and everything on a year where he hasn't had a second line center since the second game of the season. That is insane to me, is that he's doing that. They had a rotating cast line, but they didn't really leave Slavkovsky on that line until what, the newish year, like December, I think is when that line came together there, and Slavkovsky didn't really start taking off until the end of that month. The fact that he's doing this remains just so impressive. I can't wait to see where his peak is in this, in which also people say that he's still not a first line center, in which I will fight you in the streets with a trash can lid. Try me. We got to shift off of this, though. We will hopefully have more good stuff coming into next week. Like I said, there's 3 games next week. We will have them all covered for y'all. Trade deadline's a week away. But we did talk about Mount Rushmores last week. You listeners sent in some of yours and your reasoning, and we're going to get to those coming up next. But first, today's show is also brought to you by Sleepers. We are past the halfway point of the season. We are closing in on the trade deadline. And regardless of where the Habs are in the standings, I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of Locked On NHL Network. And they're our number one choice because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey podcasts and daily fantasy hockey picks. My apologies for that. All you got to do, find that the biggest stars in the league. Is McDavid going to continue to be McDavid? Is Nathan McKinnon going to continue to be the angriest man on the ice? Is Austin Matthews going to close in on 70 goals? All you have to do is pick a handful of those players and see if they will beat their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus or more in a given game. And to win 100 times your bet, you need to predict the outcome of 8 player stats. That's right, 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail those picks. Just use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. We are back here at Locked On Canadiens. This is our final segment. Last week, we talked about the Mount Rushmore of famous teams and specifically how the Montreal Canadiens is so good and what our Habs Mount Rushmore would look like. We open that up to our wonderful listening core here, to everyone out there, to, hey, who is in your Habs Mount Rushmore? And y'all came through, as you always do. Laura has some of our listener Mount Rushmores pulled up. And Laura, where are we starting? Are there reasonings for this, or is it just a lot of people saying, here are my 4, anyone who says this is wrong, otherwise is wrong?
No, there's reasoning and things like that as well. Like I did think I haven't really done a full tally in terms of counting each one, but the 4th, so we had already established that it has to be Beliveau, Lafleur, and oh my god.
Maurice Richard.
I almost said Mario Tremblay, and I need to like be kicked out of this country. I literally like it was about to
Laura has
roll
been
off my
removed
tongue.
from this podcast immediately. How dare you?
It's I caught myself saying it and I stopped myself and then I told you guys anyway. All right. Sorry. Maurice Richard. So we know that that's going to be, your first three. So there's a considerable amount of debate to be had about who the fourth one is. And lots of people had really good points. I really like this one by Robert Rice. Feel the need to throw my weight behind Jacques Plante on the fourth spot in that pantheon of legends. If you haven't read the Plante biography by Todd Deneau, take a few days or however long you need to absorb his legacy and contributions to the game because they're massive. So a lot of people talked about how Plante changing the game makes him warrant that fourth spot. Number one, this is again Rob. He literally changed the face of the game by wearing the mask in a time when it was considered cowardly to do so and forced the team to accept it. It's worth noting for people who don't understand the league of the 1950s or 60s, but players had almost no agency in their careers. So taking a stand like this was huge. He helped expand the role of the goaltender in-game by being the first goalie to play the puck on a regular basis. He was the first Canadiens goaltender to win the Hart Trophy in 1962. He helped develop the concept of goalie coaching for professional teams and even wrote his own book on goaltending, which remained popular for over 2 decades. He was a starting goalie for the Canadiens' 5 straight championships between 1956 and 1960, and he did all of this while having on and off issues with asthma his entire professional career. I just thought he needed to be highlighted a bit. So I always love hearing from our good friend Robert, not only because we work together at Habs Eyes on the Prize, but he always has a lot of insight, and all of his reasoning is always really well thought out and backed up by facts. In this case, it's backed up by facts. I'm going to go to some YouTube comments as well, just so I can pull up some of the fourth. One of them, well, actually, a couple of people said it has to be Doug Harvey, which I understand. Never seen him aside from video, but my grandfather preached the word, and he said that without Harvey, there would have been no Bobby Orr. He could control the tempo and the speed of a game effortlessly. So there were a couple of people that said I'm probably showing my age, and they picked Ken Dryden. And then for honorable mentions, obviously Scott, you brought this up. Henri Richard, like Larry Robinson, Serge Savat, like there's a few of them. A lot of people said Roy, and you can tell too, like it's like, he's somebody that most of us were around to be able to watch. Plante, another Plante, and then Howie Morenz was one of them. So like for me, the only thing with Howie Morenz is just kind of like, how do we know really, right? Like we take for granted that he's a great, but none of us were around. So
That's the thing is it's like the team itself, it is so because of how old the team is. It is I'm actually trying to find the retired numbers on Wikipedia right now that to like go about everything here. There's so much that like what retired numbers. There we go. Because okay, Jacques Plante's up there mentioned, Doug Harvey mentioned, Jean Beliveau mentioned, you have Bernie Jeffrey on, who's in the 50s. Guy Lapointe's number is retired. Howie Morenz, like you said, who played back in the 20s and 30s. Maurice Richard, Guy Lafleur, like number 12 has 2 numbers, and 16 both have multiple numbers retired for that. Serge Savard, Larry Robinson, Bob Gainey, like even for the original 6 era, you can have one, and then the dynasty era, and then let's say post 1986, like 93 onwards, is almost another entire one. There's so much history that it is hard that, like, when the Penguins put theirs up there, it's like, these are the 4. Okay.
It's an undisputed 4.
It's
There's 4.
It's phenomenal. And like, it's hard to find a team that can match the Habs in terms of, well, we could pick this goalie or this goalie or this goalie or this goalie or this defenseman. Like they could run 3 Mount Rushmores, where some teams would be lucky to put together 1.5, which is the biggest part of this. And I know that maybe it is not a quality thing, that, yes, the Penguins one is incredible. We get that. It is hard to compete with the actual like peaks of the Canadiens and like just the depth behind that. And yeah, they were one of the first teams and they're older, whatever. Deal with it. Get some more history, basically, I guess. If you still have more Mount Rushmores, you can send them into lockedoncanadians@gmail.com, at LO_Canadians on Twitter. You can follow Laura at The Active Stick. You can follow myself at Scott Matla. We will be back. We will have your Coyotes preview and some other things going into tomorrow's episode for the game on Tuesday. But until then, we will see you all next time.